give a chance to start. Excellent. Okay, welcome to the Scrutiny Programme Committee. As you know, today we're going to be looking at the Crime and Disorder Safer Swansea Partnership. But let's start off with apologies for absence. I have Councillor Lyndon Jones. I know that. Do we have anybody else who wishes to pass on apologies or any other apologies, Bridge?
We're not aware of any, Chair. I think a couple of members did say they may be late, but I think Councillor Burtonshaw's here and Councillor Wendy Lewis, perhaps, if she's not with us already.
Yeah, I think a couple of members.
There we are.
There we are. Excellent. Good. Okay. Right. Item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Does anybody want to disclose any interests at all? No? Oh, Sue?
Yes, please. I know Wendy and I have had an email which confused us, but I would still like to declare an interest because I have a son working in the police force, South Wales Police.
Okay. Wendy?
Yes, I'd like to declare a personal interest because my son works in the police force.
Okay, thank you. Right. Anybody else have any declarations? No? Okay. Item 3 is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. Anybody want to fess up anything? No? Okay. In that case, we're going to move on to item 4, which are the minutes of the last meeting. So I'm going to go through them for information. So on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Are we agreed those minutes are accurate? Everyone content to that? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, item 5 is public question time. Do we have any public questions at all, Bridge?
We do not, Chair.
Okay, that's straightforward and simple. Okay, in that case, we're going to move on to item 6, which is the Safer Swansea Partnership. I understand we have Chief Superintendent Trudy Merrick, Adam Hill, Superintendent Mark Breyer, Paul Thomas, Councillor Andrew Lewis and Councillor Alison Pugh. Have I missed anyone or have I introduced anyone who isn't here? No? Okay, thank you. So this is our annual crime and disorder session. So to hear from the police and council lead representatives of the Safer Swansea Community Safety Partnership. We've all had papers including providing background information and advice, as well as a reminder of the issues we discussed last time. And you've all had a copy of the Safer Swansea Community Safety Strategy 2018 to 2021, which shows the local strategic priorities and objectives. So I'm going to ask who's going to be introducing this item. Is that you, Adam, or are you going to have a presentation?
Chair, if that's okay, I'll start the ball rolling and then move on from there, if that's okay.
Thank you.
So on behalf of the partnership, which is co-chaired by Chief Superintendent Trudy Merrick and myself, I'd like to thank the Scrutiny Committee for the interest in community safety. The last 12 months have been extremely challenging for everyone. The COVID-19 pandemic and associated lockdowns have clearly had a big impact on everyone and everything, and crime and disorder is no different. The pandemic has brought about new challenges for the Safer Swansea Partnership and all the agencies involved. Lockdown has meant that more people have been spending time at home, and unfortunately, this has resulted in an increase in domestic incidents, neighbour-related antisocial behaviour, and hate crime. Effective partnership working has been more important than ever over the past 12 months, and has been critical in successfully tackling these new issues or increasing issues. While it is hoped that the worst of COVID-19 is over, and we must remember we're not at the end of COVID-19, it will undoubtedly throw up more challenges over the next 12 months. So maintaining those excellent working relationships with the partnership will be paramount in responding to these challenges and keeping Swansea safe. So I'm going to ask Superintendent Mark Breyer and Paul, who will provide more of an insight, and we'll go through the slides and share some what is business as usual and some which is business unusual, has been like in Swansea. So Mark, Paul, if I can hand over to you.
Okay.
Paul,
I-
are you on mute?
Are you unmuted? Yes, please
Hello,
unmute.
can you hear us now?
Yeah,
I can
that's
hear
it.
you now, Paul. Yes.
Okay, sorry, Chair, I was just checking IT to see whether the gremlins have been eliminated and you can actually see the slides.
Yep, I can see the slides. Can everybody else see the slides? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit small it is actually.
Yes.
Well, what I'll say, Chair, is that the slides that you will see here are the slides that are in the agenda pack. So you can follow, if it's easier to follow through the actual papers that have been issued, we won't deviate from the slides and we will just put some context to the slides as we work through the presentation.
Okay, I think Paul, work through the slides on the screen. Other people, if they can't read them on the screen, they can use the agenda pack. Okay.
Unfortunately, Chair, I can't open anything of mine on the agenda. But anyway, proceed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it would be a good place to start with regard to looking at the governance structure as to how we function and operate. And I think this will help in understanding how Safer Swansea Partnership functions and how we hold to account each of the work streams that you will see under Strategic 1 to 5 on the diagram on slide 3 in the presentation. So the 5 key priorities of the Safer Swansea Partnership are supported by individual groups, and there will be a number of subgroups that will report into the work stream leads. So if you can see at the bottom of the governance structure, you will see that we have the Violence Against Women, Domestic Violence and Serious Violence Strategy Group. There is a leadership group there. They will have an action plan. For substance misuse, the Western Bay Area Planning Board have a number of subgroups, one of which is harm reduction, and they too have an action plan. And all of those strategic priorities will have groups that have action plans. They will report to the Safer Swansea Partnership, which is chaired by Adam and Trudy, on a quarterly basis. And that is how we have the accountability and visibility for ensuring that we are meeting the objectives under each of the strategic priorities. You'll see to the right that there is something called Channel. That is a multi-agency partnership which looks to reduce those that may be on a pathway to radicalisation, and that links into our area contest boards, both for contest and for also the Western Bay safeguarding boards. To the left of the Safer Swansea Partnership Steering Group, you will see 3 boxes there. Those are important because they help inform the direction and objectives that will be set by the Safer Swansea Partnership. And you'll see there then that we will report to the Public Service Board, who will hold us to account to ensure that we are delivering on those key strategic priorities. And those strategic priorities are currently, as you can see on the screen, which is violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence, substance misuse, stronger communities, the evening and nighttime economy, hate crime and community tension monitoring. Now, these are informed by a number of strategies, one being the Police and Crime Commissioner Police and Crime Reduction Plan. The local wellbeing assessments will help inform some of those strategic priorities. We apply the principles of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act to all of the priorities. We were fortunate to, when we developed the current strategy, that there was the Western Compass public perception consultation, which was very useful in understanding what the public's perceptions were of crime, real or not. The VAUDA legislation has helped us focus on some of the key areas there and risk. And the community cohesion strategic framework for Welsh Government helps us drive through some of the community cohesion issues under the stronger community strategic priority. There are a whole host of strategic partnerships and operational partnerships that work almost on a daily basis to ensure that we meet those objectives under each of those strategic priorities. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Mark, who was going to take us through a number of slides. We're a bit of a tag team here, so you'll hear Mark for a couple, and then I will come back in on some of the slides as we work through the presentation.
Yeah, hi everyone, good afternoon. Obviously, I just want to set a bit of a context to where we're going to go this afternoon. I want to sort of describe in some simple terms around the journey we've been on in the last year and a half or so. And I think the image you see in front of you is what I'm trying to say, that none of us have been here before. From a community safety perspective, from a personal perspective, and there's a lot of challenging times and learning to be done. But I think for us, and I think as a major point, is that we build on the existing relationships that are already in place in some of the key areas that we were working on prior to the pandemic. But we built on them to look at key areas of particularly around COVID enforcement and education. I just want to talk to you initially about what that looked like. And we're going to go through sort of just talk about the joint enforcement team, and then I'm going to talk to you about problem solving groups, and Paul will pick up some other areas around community projects and partnership meetings. So the joint enforcement team, just to give you an idea of what that was a resource commitment from both the local authority and ourselves to build on the existing relationships. It was backed by a memorandum of understanding, and it was to look at areas of key concern around licensing, trading standards, and COVID enforcement. And I'm going to make a point around COVID enforcement in a second, around balance and proportionality, which was real part of what we needed to look at in the recent few months we've been through. But the reason why this was a good thing to do, that gave us clear bottom-up, top-down governance on actually looking at what our priorities were around COVID enforcement, and again, community cohesion issues, which were linked to that too. So you look on the slide there, we talked about a joint commitment, but we also had joint tasking. And the practicality of this was dial-ins with the practitioners, where we shared information, we shared data. And to make this real, and a basic example for you to think about, if we had a supermarket, for example, that was having some issues with COVID rationale and COVID issues, we would deal with the public side of it, but trading standards would then deal with the supermarket itself around engagement and education, and in some areas enforcement. And at the height of the pandemic, just for information, I think there was a direct real-time link into our bronze inspector from the local authority, because I think if you remember, I know we've come into calmer waters now, but at the time we had some real issues with breaching, and let's be serious about this. The breaches in some areas, in some premises, were around community transmission, and we were very much aware of what that meant. And I say we're in calmer waters now a little bit, but we had to be really quite clued up and joined up with some of the priorities of the local authority and the action that then followed. So that gave us the joint tasking, gave us a joint targeting approach. It gave us a proactive approach to identifying areas of high transmission, and all of that activity was tracked. Now I'll give you some figures now, and I don't really want to dwell on the figures because I do want to make a point later on. This year we were upwards of somewhere in 1,200 fixed penalty notices that were issued since we started this particular journey. And the top three there around gathering indoors and travel issues and outdoor breaches. But the point I really want to make is that we obviously know that we're in a place where people do stuff for two reasons. And from a community safety perspective, and thinking about how we maintain the consent and encouragement of the public in difficult times, we know that half or the majority of the people do it through lack of education and awareness. However, there are some that do it through willful breach and ignoring the good in what we're trying to do. So we took this principally in 4 stages that you will have heard before around engagement, explanation, encouragement, and enforcement was the last option. However, we've had to enforce in certain circumstances. And we did all of that jointly with the local authority in the context of what we understood, particularly where premises were involved, around business survival, because we knew that what we were doing had an impact at a difficult time in certain areas. So that's just one example. The joint enforcement teams are one example of where we built on what we've already had in place, and we've acutely made better and come together to tackle quite a difficult and changing scenario around regulations. And to be honest with you, a little bit of a roller coaster of the regulations changing, what they practically meant, what would our proportionate response be, and maintaining the consent and engagement of the public, which are quite difficult things to balance. So just as a side, just to show you some tracking information, the next slide, which we've just pulled up, just shows that jointness, if you like, of performance around that area. So we were really properly joined in the practical delivery of that, which was good. So that's joint enforcement. I just want to make I'll be quite quick here, but I want to talk a little bit about problem solving and engagement, particularly within the pandemic. And because I know at the last scrutiny panel, I think there was some questions, or there was some interest in impact and engagement. And I think we'll all accept that engagement with the public, it's always been historically a challenge for the police and partners. And I think what's made the pandemic a little bit more interesting is the role of social media. Now, social media gives a perception of reality, but it's our job just as much to deal with the perception of crime and incidents and antisocial behaviour as it is to deal with reality. So some of that challenge was around, and I get it, we all get it, about people being sat seeing things and maybe exacerbating what is a problem on social media, and then expecting delivery of that service to solve that problem. But we have continued with engagement throughout the pandemic. It's changed, but we've continued with it, because why shouldn't we? And although that we know that the pact has its limitations, in the pandemic it did stall, it did pause. But we have gone onto social media, we have gone onto online engagement, we have gone into supermarkets, into open spaces, we have done operation perceptions, we've gone onto Teams, we've done some outdoor engagement in some key areas to sort of fill that void. But that was already in place, because we do know that PACT is only one avenue for engagement, and it still operates in places like Marina, Bryn Mawr and Uplands. But we do know that just simply due to the demographic of our region, that people want to be informed and coordinated and talked to in different ways. And there's a mosaic of different things that we need to be, or a mosaic of options, if you like, that we need to be exploring. So that engagement is still there. It was limited to a point, but it is still there. But what I probably want to reassure you about is that we have rejigged some of the acute ways in which we solve problems. Now, you probably heard around the OSARA way of looking at problems and problem solving. I'll just come into in a little bit of time. But we've got in place problem solving groups that operate within the BCU, which have clear partnership involvement for the likes of local authority housing, victim focused fire services, the list goes on. But take a problem, dissect it, and look at how we actually solve it. And some of them problem solving groups just jumped online in the pandemic, so they didn't go away, which was a really good thing. And to come to some of the issues that we were dealing with and are still dealing with, some of the outcomes, which did involve some liaison with councillors as well as the public. Operation Larocca, which you may be aware of, which is Penland Racecourse, which is a problem of off-road bikes. We've tackled that. There's been a wall built, there's been boulders put down, but it's a number of options to solve a particular community problem. And I think just for information on that, I know off-road bikes it causes a real issue for quite a lot of residents and ourselves. There is moves to reintroduce a force-wide off-road bike team to tackle some of that issue. Oh, wow. So you've got Operation Larocca, which continued. You've got Operation Zero, which is a blind and mice issue, which is around ASB. And we'll talk a bit about contextual safeguarding there later on in this presentation. We've also got issues that you're well aware of in Matthew Street and the homelessness potentially in the city centre, and some of the issues that we've got there with sex working that we had prior to the pandemic, and then that did continue. If I just move on to the next slide, you'll see that we've put a lot of structure around some of the problem solving, and you'll see in certain areas, particularly in the left-hand side of that map of Swansea. And the OSARA, for every one of them things listed on the bullet points, there's an OSARA plan of action in place. Now, OSARA is, as I say, it's a partnership way with the police in trying to solve a problem and picking out the bits and seeing what the conclusion or the outcome could be. And for instance, I'll just read off just to get this some reality around what I'm talking about, in particular with sex working and the issues we have there. The objective of the OSARA is the safety and safeguarding and support of the sex workers being exploited for sex. Now that gives a slant to that OSARA to solve a problem. Deal with the consequences, yes, but solve the problem in the first instance. And what I need to say here is that the safeguarding comes hand in hand with disruption and enforcement. So that particular OSARA has got a clear mix of support for individuals, of diversion for individuals, but also around enforcement for the people who are exploiting the persons involved in that particular activity.
Sorry,
so what I've just done there.
Is OSARA an acronym of some sort?
Yes, it is. I'm glad you asked. You're now going to test me on what it stands for, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yes.
It means objective, scanning, analysis, response, and assessment. Now, every bit of that stage, we have we meet and consult with relevant partners. So if you think about the issues we've had on High Street, the relevant partners would be third sector support for the people who are working there in this activity. So what I'm trying to say is we provide a solution that everybody's bought into and provides a solution going forward. So all I've done there, just before I hand back to Paul, is giving you just a very whistle-stop tour of an idea of when we came together to deal with COVID and some of the challenges that presented, but also around some of the daily business that hasn't gone away and some of the problem-solving issues there. So I'll hand back to Paul now for slide 11.
Thanks, Mark. What I'll do is I just want to highlight some of the really good partnership work that's been going on during the pandemic, under the community projects, the partnership meetings and outreach work. And if I give some examples for each of those, hopefully it will give you a clearer picture of some of the complexities and risks that we've had to deal with and some of the solutions that we're putting together to manage them. So one of the key community projects that we're undertaking at the moment is work on the vetch in the Sandfields area. We have had significant issues there with county lines activity, with criminality, and the vetch being used for the dealing of drugs, the taking of drugs, and some of the ASB associated with that. So work has started to design out some of the areas and make it safer for the local community to use and feel safe using it. Some of the issues were highlighted by a number of residents, and we are working with the Sandfields Residents Association, along with ward members, in addressing some of those risks and threats to the area. So the project is looking at a number of solutions to it. 3 hotspot CCTV cameras have already been installed actually at the vetch to capture any of the ASB activity and help our police colleagues then in taking forward any enforcement that needs to be done or any arrest that needs to happen. Cutting back of the overgrowth and a knocking down of a perimeter wall so that we can level some of the land there and make it safe to use. That also actually enhances public surveillance, because we do rely on members of the public to report in any issues and concerns they may have that is the activity that's going on there, but on any concerns that they may have of people being exploited. The good news here is that we've worked very, very closely with ward members. We've managed to draw on some external funding as well as ward member grants. And we're looking on 2 stages. One is to develop some additional play equipment there, some additional seating and a Mooga. And I don't actually know what Mooga means, but I think it's something like a multi-surface sports area where everyone actually
multi-use games area.
I was almost there, but it's going to be a safe space for the community to use and have activities on the vetch. The phase 2 element of it is actually to improve lighting, because it needs to happen, and also working with the allotment and the people there is to actually have a community cafe there, which is an exciting project, and we are making good progress on delivering on that. With regard to partnership meetings, I just want to sort of highlight two of the significant partnership meetings that have continued to work and for some of the outcomes. One in particular is the Street Vulnerability MARAC. I actually chair that multi-agency partnership, and I think over the year it has evolved and become a very strong partnership, particularly with the third sector and some of those services that provide some of the much needed support to those who do struggle with substance misuse and the challenges that brings to individuals. Since the SV MARAC has met, we have supported over 60 individuals who are either homeless, are begging and homeless, or just have a number of challenges, be it mental well-being or substance misuse. And what we've been able to do is work in partnership to enable access to services, to provide a holistic wraparound support service to address their needs. And we've had some very, very good results. We've actually had people that we've taken from the streets and are now actually in some form of accommodation being supported, and they're responding well to some of the services and the activities that we are helping to enable them to work through their challenges to get them in a better place. The high street is another area which has developed significantly through the COVID period, to a point where we are now actually converting 3 empty business premises at the top of High Street to create some community space for safe space and engagement work to be done, and activities to work from there with the community. And one exciting development is that the chief executive of the YMCA is very keen to actually introduce some pop-up youth clubs there, not only for the young people there, but also to get the community and adults involved in activities. So we've been working very hard there with the contractors, and we've got 2 engagement events coming up in early June, where we hope the community and ward members will become more involved in designing what those activities in that space will look like. The good news is we also have the takeaway there that we are looking to improve and clean first of all, but more importantly, we're rather hoping that some form of social enterprise will be established within the community, and they can use that facility to maybe run as a cafe or do some cookery lessons, and it would be great then to maybe have some grow your own projects there where they could actually then use it to cook and sell to members of the public. The outreach work, that continued. It was compromised, as you well imagine, with regard to COVID, but where we had issues of ASB within some of the parks, we have worked with the Pcsos and youth workers, and we've actually been able to draw down on some additional funding to fund additional posts so that outreach work can continue. An example was Cwmdonkin Park, where we had quite significant levels of ASB, and working in partnership with the police and the youth service and other third sector, we ran some activity and some engagements there with young people to just really help and understand why this was going on and what we could do to actually prevent it from happening going forward. I think other areas that I'd just like to sort of highlight is the work that Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service have done regarding fire setting and hill fires, and some of the work they've done within schools in raising awareness about how dangerous it is, and trying to get young people to understand why it's not sensible to set fires, apart from the obvious that it will injure people, but it's the damage it does to wildlife. They've done some terrific work, and they continue to do some terrific work. On the outset of the pandemic, one of the most important things that we could do to support VAUDA, the Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, was that we actually started delivering food parcels to victims of domestic violence, where perhaps the perpetrator was the only person bringing income into that family or that household. So we ensured, working with the leadership group, that food parcels were given to our most vulnerable, and alongside that, then there was an offer made with regard to improving home security, which the team were involved in sourcing and also setting up various alarms and cameras within individuals' homes if they so wished. There are currently 35 hotspot cameras in and around Swansea. They are set up primarily for fly tipping and general ASB. We work very closely with ward members. If there are issues within the community there, we'll look to support the ward member there and set up the hotspot cameras. We've run some very good pause on patrol engagement events in parks using the dogs and those who walk dogs or use the parks as a way of the eyes and ears for us all to report in any activity that they believe to be suspicious. We give dog collars away, and we signed up, I think, nearly 100 people in the last 6 events, and we're looking to do 2 further events in the half term coming up. We've got 2 A-frames that we use, and we move around Swansea to promote awareness on certain subject matters. Domestic violence has been one, substance misuse was others. And just 2 very quick partnership engagement events we did. We hired a Christmas chalet for 3 weeks, and partners worked from there in engaging with the public, even through the COVID, and was well received. And something on a lighter side, that the team created an advent calendar that was posted on social media, which every day that the window was open, there was a community safety message or awareness message, which was really, really, really well received. So I hope that just gives you a flavour of some of the work that's remained in place. We've actually improved in some areas with the partnership working and some of those outcomes and solutions. I'll hand back to Mark now, who will continue with the presentation.
Can I just say, we have got a huge amount of time. We've got a lot of questions you want to ask. So is it possible to just move the presentation on a bit faster? Thank you.
Yeah, no worries at all. I'll put as fast as I can. Basically, the next slide is talking about the crime picture, the reduction in demand and the increase in demand. The figures will show traditional demand that's increased, but some elements have remained the same. And really, some of the challenges that we've had are around policing COVID regulations and SA1 and licensing, like I spoke about earlier. And where we are now is looking at how we embed some of that learning through recovery. I'll move on to the next slides because they are the crime slides that's probably you're interested in, rather than dwell on that. What you can see there is quite an interesting crime picture. The stuff in pink is what has actually increased, and the stuff in green shows decreases. Now, if you want to move quickly to the right-hand corner at the bottom, you see that we've had quite a heavy increase in ASB. Now, we know from doing some analysis on what that looks like, the majority of that is actually COVID related. And the real figure for traditional ASB is sitting around 7.9%. Now, we just want to make you aware of that, because we're still dealing with the basic business, which, and for instance, I can give you some figures here now around how we deal with ASB. 183 stage 1 letters have been sent out. But the key learning there, or the key point there, is that only 7% get to final warning. So what that actually basically means is that we are still working hard with the intervention in the early stages of dealing with ASB. And the types of ASB that we have got, if we just come out of COVID for a second, which have exacerbated some of these figures, you are talking about youth annoyance, we are talking about neighbour disputes, we are talking about some issues in relation with street begging and the like. So ASB has been there as a real indicator for us, but the way in which we manage it is still quite structured. But we manage it from the point of view of intervention, similar to the COVID side of enforcement. We do as much as we possibly do or can do before we get to the likes of civil injunctions and community behaviour orders and the like. So that's just a basic point on ASB. If you look left at that crime data, you'll see that drug misuse has remained a real constant for us. And I think the market within COVID did not falter. It remained the same. It just kind of went somewhere else. One of the key aspects of drug misuse is the nighttime economy, which stopped, but it still continued this particular area of our business. And you'll be aware that we are doing some work on an integrated approach which looks at deferred prosecutions and diversion for individuals, again trying to really sort out the problem prior to enforcement. But the point I really want to make about this slide is that there is some hidden harm there, that we know that DV was not reported as much as it had been reported, but we know it still went on because the nighttime economy was the conduit for which some DV was reported, and that stopped. We also know that child safeguarding issues was an issue within the communities that was not necessarily reported to us, because we also know that conduit for reporting is sitting within the schools primarily. So we do know there's some real hidden harm that is part and parcel of the pandemic, that is only just bringing itself back to the service for us to deal with and understand what it fully looks like. In fact, I think the term has been used in other areas around, there's a shadow pandemic on the pandemic, and particularly with respect to crime, where lockdown and social distancing makes the risk worse and the impact of violence worse, especially in the home and online. And just moving this on quickly, I won't spend too much time on this slide. This slide tells you about crime and the movement of crime with respect to lockdowns, and you can see how the shape of the graph pinpoints the main lockdown areas and even some of the regulations lifting. And that's the only point I want to really take there. And again, this slide, just to move the presentation along quickly, I just want to put this up to show that there's been some real key pinch points in partnership, involvement and activity around stuff happening in the community. And if you look at the left-hand side of that slide, you'll see that we've had issues with cohesion, with certain aspects within the community causing us some worry, if you like, or just we need to, particularly around cohesion of certain groups, with Swansea City taking the lead, that type of thing. We've also got protest that has caused us some concerted effort, albeit it hasn't had the same impact here as we've seen elsewhere, which is a really good thing, and they have been quite well maintained. And we've also had issues around SA1 and the beaches, and SA1 is and still is and was a move-in feast, and that was completely linked to COVID, but we're keeping a very close eye on that as to whether that is something we want to consider with some more arbitrary enforcement, particularly maybe in the future around PSBOs. But we are actually thinking, particularly with the beachfront, around some contextualized safeguarding and problem solving around what that looks like. So I just wanted to put that slide up. I'm going quickly through it because you'll see that we had some quite interesting interactions with the student population, the university, that were very positive from the university perspective, and the private landlords and the public landlords within COVID. So you'll see that them are some of the pinch points that we've dealt with in the last few months. And I think some of the challenges of just remaining partnership led, understanding what the consequences are of some of that change, and like I said previously, being proportionate and robust in our response, whilst understanding the consent of the public. And I just want to move quickly on because I'm wary of time. The other area, just a little bit of comment, you'll see some figures on there for violence against women and girls. I think if we're thinking about areas of business where we need to put more of a concerted effort behind into the future, this may be one of them. And I'm thinking more and more about target hardening areas and positive things we can do community safety wise with the partnership. Around, for instance, a vulnerability training for nighttime economy and staff. Extension of the best bar non-ski that operates in Wine Street and elsewhere, and looking at safe spaces and understanding how it can make them safer, and a rejuvenation of some of the initiatives we've done previously around schemes like Ask for Angela, and also some of the issues around GPS tracking for mobile phones. So what I'm trying to say here is that we recognise this is an area we need to put a little bit more effort into, albeit some of the crime stats you see there have not been excessive because they've been sat in that decline, if you like, because of the pandemic we've just gone through, or are going through. A real close eye on the next slide and the next area of business around hate crime. It has been relatively static, but it has increased, excuse me, in certain areas. There's no particular spike, and there's no particular area that is causing us concern. However, they are race related predominantly. And we were worried, or we had an eye on the impact of Brexit. That didn't really come to fruition for us. And we've only seen some very small isolated pockets of racist graffiti within the area, but we're reassured because a lot of the activity that we do on a day-to-day basis is around community cohesion and contact. And for instance, the community team with me and community safety have weekly dial-ins. They have a community cohesion group that sits. We have proactive hate crime officers who actually work in the community. And I think, you know, some of the areas that we may have had difficulty in the past, we not necessarily have that difficulty now around transgender and around the travelling community, and also around asylum seekers. We've got impact and communication avenues open with them communities. But this is a continual thing that we've got to keep doing, and we've got to put the effort in early. So that's really just a note on hate crime and some of the work that we're doing. And I'll just move it quickly on. The other area that I know we've got to keep a really close eye on is around knife crime. As you're aware, I think there's two basic things to say here. We have a dedicated team within the police called OPSEPTA team that works specifically on a proactive enforcement element to deal with knife crime. And to give you some basic figures, in the from April last year, we've done 240 arrests, 1,400 stop searches, 160 weapons seized. So they're very proactive in what they do. But notwithstanding, and this is always going to be the point, isn't it? Notwithstanding that the education within the schools is imperative here, and the schools liaison officers and indeed our community safety teams and our MPTs are committed to the education at early doors around the dangers of this particular area. So that's another area that I think needs to comment. And the final one, I think. As we stated in the crime figures, we haven't seen a decrease in this area. We've seen it being continual, which is something that we really need to concentrate on. And similar to knife crime area, we have dedicated teams looking at drug misuse and drug enforcement. They're not necessarily seeing it about the communities, they're plain clothes. So the priority policing teams actively target intel-led county lines information on particular areas within the city. And again, the figures I can quote you now, just for the last year, they've had somewhere in the region of 240 prisoners. They've seized 40 weapons. And the figures around the drug seizures are quite immense. £807,000 of crack cocaine, 1.3 million pounds worth of cannabis in the last 12 months. So they have had some very good results, but this has got to be seen hand in hand with what else can we do as a partnership around support, diversion, and some of the integrated work around that particular problem. Because we're just dealing with, we're not just dealing with the consequences. I've just talked to you about the consequences. We are also concentrating on what is the primary problem and whether we can do a lot more to deal with that. So I'm coming to sort of the last slide now, and I hope I've moved that on sufficiently for you. And I think that the last slide, we are going into recovery, hopefully. And I think you'll agree that, I mean, as myself and Paul, we do work very, very closely together, as with every element and structure between both organisations. And we just want to keep some of the good bits that we've got. And I think for ourselves, it is around tasking and coordinating and being joined up daily. But being joined up with the point of what is the outcome for us both, what areas are we going to concentrate on next. And we have got current areas, we mentioned them already, SA1, the beachfront, things like off-road biking. And just talking about the beachfront for a second, I just want to just pause a second and just get the contextual safeguarding, contextual problem solving is around getting every partner involved in a particular problem. And if you look at the beachfront, I've seen some minutes from a contextual problem-solving meeting that occurred last week, and they were talking about the beachfront in isolation. At that meeting were the police, the fire service, the YMCA, Pobble were at the meeting, the bar Secrets was at the meeting on the front, Youth Offending Service, and many others. And their initial reaction or their initial outcome to some of them issues for the beachfront, which is the congregation of the youths. One of the first things is around having QR codes actually sitting on the beachfront that offer support for vulnerable people. So, and secondly, around youth engagement days. Thirdly, around parental engagement. Fourthly, around safe spaces and provision for young people, school networks, and the list goes on. But that work is very important and critical to us, because we do know that is the source of the problem, whereas the punitive approach would be the Pcso, which would just lead to displacement. I'm not saying we don't do that, we may explore it, but a lot of work at the moment is looking at the source of the problem, not necessarily the consequence. And I just want to make that point. And I think, and Paul will come in shortly, but the next 12 months is around looking at our current business as we knew it pre-pandemic, but also looking at what is the outcome of where we've been, because we don't really fully know what that looks like. And we are talking about the socioeconomic impact of that. And I think if Paul, if you want to just tackle any of that.
Yeah, just very, very quickly, Chair. I mean, going back to the contextual safeguarding issue with regard to SA1, through the partnership, it's very interesting to hear what they're discussing. You know, the media will just put out that it's a rowdy bunch of people that is causing harm and distress to people. But from a safeguarding point of view, we know for a fact that there were children under the age of 16, some as young as 12, that were going then onto other places with male adults in their 20s, if not 30s. And there's a huge exploitation risk here, and all of the associated risks with regard to trafficking and county lines. So it really is important, and I can't tell you how committed both the statutory services and in particular social services and safeguarding, but the non-statutory with regard to community safety, which is where we come in looking at how we address these problems going forward. So I'd just like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity. Apologise that it's gone on a little bit too long, and thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Maybe kick off with some questions. Shall I just start? I've noticed your Safer Swansea Community Safety Strategy expires this year. What is the process now whereby you bring a new strategy in? To what extent do you consult and involve the council and other partners in producing that new strategy? Yeah,
I mean, we're obviously waiting for the wellbeing assessment to progress. We will wait for the Police and Crime Commissioner, Crime Reduction Action Plan, and any other legislation that may be online. But we will look at crime and data statistics at a local level, and then there will be that formal consultation where we will go out to everyone in Swansea with an opportunity to comment on the proposals that the Safer Swansea Partnership will put forward as the key priorities to help inform the strategy going forward.
So what you used in terms of communication, how do you communicate that need for people to respond to that consultation? Is it social media, the newspaper? What do you do?
Yeah, it'll be all of the above, Chair. I mean, we will look to try and enable everyone an opportunity to be part of that engagement and consultation to help inform that strategy. Okay, fair enough. We'll see how that. Adam, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say that there'll be a full engagement strategy that we'll have to deploy with this. And if we think about the socio-economic duty that we now have upon us since the 31st of March, we need to make sure that we do that and do that thoroughly. So even previously where we've done engagement, it needs to be even more thorough this year. But as Paul said, there's a number of pieces of work currently underway, such as the wellbeing assessment that we need to add into and build from. And so it'll take all this year in order to gather all that data in order to be able to put it into train, ready for next year to have a strategy we can consult on. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've a number of members have already indicated some questions in advance. I know Wendy Lewis has to go to another meeting, so I'm going to bring Wendy in next if Wendy's got a question she wants to ask.
Well, thank you, Chair. What has been the experience in the area in terms of local areas, now our wards, of breach of COVID rules and regulations?
Paul?
Sorry. Well, sorry, I can probably answer that. Are we talking about specific types of breaches? Is that what the question is?
Well, I would say going into people's houses when, you know, months and months ago when you weren't allowed, and what's your response to that?
Well, I think the basic breakdown of some of the issues we've had locally, I think the main issue we've had is people gathering indoors. That's been the main issue we've had, and we've had lots of information from the communities when they suspect a breach. So and some of that information that's come from the community has some of it's been right, some of it has been not quite right, but some of it's been done in well-intentional reports to the police. But the majority of our calls, or the majority of the times that we've had to enforce, are around people gathering indoors, and I think that is the vast majority. And I think probably out of the number of fixed penalties that I gave you, I think we gave 846, which were linked to people gathering doors alone. So that's been the key element, and it's not specific to ward. It's just the key element of some of the breaches that we've seen. If that answers your question.
Sort of, not 100%, because I don't want to go into specifics on here, but it's not worked well in my ward of that happening.
Okay, maybe you can take that up with them outside the meeting, Wendy, if that's okay. Okay,
Yes,
June June Bettenshaw.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got another question as well, if you'll allow it. But the first one is, you've shown how COVID has impacted on the work, but what has been the main impact of COVID on crime and disorder, and what activities or work has been done by the partnership to alleviate or help this? And the second question, if you'll allow me, Chair,
yeah, sure.
is you mentioned working with dog owners, etc., in the parks. Can you give us an update if there was any dog napping in the area and what effect this had?
Chair, if I could just come in, if I could just pick up on a couple of comments there and observations, then Mark, I'm sure we'll fill in the gaps. With regard, I'll give you an example about how we have looked to engage more with people, is that clearly face-to-face engagement through pandemic was almost non-existent. So what we have done is we've done a lot online, and in particular with young people. So we've created a number of activities and awareness sessions to make people understand, some about what COVID restrictions are and what the implications are to those that don't follow it, the impacts it may have. So we've done a lot of online. We have done some engagement, as we said, with regard to young people in parks when it's been allowed, socially distanced, to work with them with regard to some of the ASB in the areas that we have. It has been challenging and difficult, but I have had colleagues that have still gone out through the course of the pandemic to erect hotspot cameras when ward members and the community have had concerns about issues around ASB, or in particular fly tipping. And with regard to the dogs and the Pause on Patrol initiative, I would suggest that there has been no increase in the number of dogs that have been kidnapped or taken in Swansea that normally would happen over the course of a year. What tended to happen were that the dog breeders were being targeted and the puppies being stolen. But there were concerns, obviously, with people who go on a walk with their dog, that the perception was that they may be attacked and the dogs taken from them. So it was that engagement work to reassure members of the public that the statistics didn't support what was being said in media and particularly on social media. And we had a case in point where someone in an area of Swansea had posted that they had just been attacked and their dog removed. And when investigated, they weren't actually a dog owner. So on the one hand, we were trying to deal with spurious comments made on social media to balance against those that clearly have a concern or may have been subjected to some form of intimidation.
June, do you want to add anything to that? Are you okay?
Yes, I don't think that got through to members of the public. I'm a dog owner, and I must admit I was afraid to take my dog out for walks, and I know there are a number of other councillors in the same position, because it hadn't got through to us that it wasn't as serious as the press were making out.
I'm sorry to hear that, Councillor. I mean, we did put a lot out on social media, and I know the police did a lot of work in the media as well to try and reassure members of the public. But please, if we're in the park, come and see us. You'll get a dog collar, and you can sign up to Pause on Patrol if you're not there, and you'll get a newsletter, and you'll get some updates on statistics for your area. So I'm sure that after this, if you'd like, we can sign you up and you can receive further information. I will also say that we are actually about to do something actually in the press with regard to Pause and Patrol and 2 events that are coming up. So it will be going out probably, if not by the end of this week, the beginning of next week, which will highlight Pause and Patrol and the benefits of signing up and what you can get from it.
I think as well, Paul, wasn't there a big arrest made and lots of dogs liberated at one stage, which may have given the public the impression that it was more right than it actually was?
Yeah, this was, to be honest with you, this was a difficult thing to work our way through, because we knew there was an issue. We knew that, but it was more of a cross-border issue than something was operating locally. So I know some of the work the Community Safety Partnership was quite right and proper in educating around some of the issues that we had and for crime prevention, but it was more of a cross-border issue that we had here, and we did act upon it in Neath and Port Talbot with our Dyfed-Powys Police colleagues that did hit the media, which did show some positive action. So what I think that the bottom line is, it is an issue, it is something to be mindful of, but the impact locally in Swansea was not necessarily there. And once social media get a hold of it, it spirals, and we do have an issue trying to deal with that perception.
Okay, Adam, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say, comms is an important tool for us in terms of getting that message out, and we recognise that. And I think that the difficulty during COVID is that so many people have been swamped with information, some misinformation, some accurate information, but swamped. All the social media channels have been hot with lots of information. And so one of the things we need to look at moving forward is how do we get our comms through? And the best way is, as Paul said, signing up for Pause on Patrol so that we have that contact detail, so that we can get to specific inboxes or emails, or where to go for actual factual information. So we're looking at improving our comms over the next 12 months of making sure it's specific to the area of concern and how we can do that. Thank you, Chair.
I know that the police don't actually interact with Facebook, though I know they do monitor what happens on Facebook. I think it's sometimes useful if you come up an issue on social media, which in a particular area, that you contact the local councillor who can then put out corrective information. Obviously we can't the police can't do that, but the local councillor can. So that might be something you might want to look at in particular as part of that communication strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Chair. And the other thing is that as a partnership, where then that's the area that we want to get into, to identify how we can best utilise councillors, local groups, but also the partnership as an entity to have its own social media presence. But that takes a lot of upkeep. So if we can utilise other partners like local councillors, then that'll be fantastic. So thank you for that offer, Chair.
Okay, Chris Holly's next, I think. Chris, there we are. You're muted, by the way.
Sorry, as I was told, muted. The first question is about antisocial behaviour and the significant increase that's been going on. When we come out of the when we come out of the lockdown, how is the partnership getting ready to prepare for the possible increase that's going to take place? Can I ask another couple of questions, Chair?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Also, there's been a real spate of catalytic converters stolen from cars, which has been a great distress to a lot of people, and some people I know who have gone out to go to work and then find they got a car without an exhaust. And that is something which, it seems to me as if, and it seems to many other people, the police have no idea how to cope with this, and are they going to scrapyards to check that where they've been stolen from? I think that really is. And the other thing I would like to ask, and through the partnership, is if the public give the police information or the partnership information, how is that, well, if you like, for the want of a better term, stored and disseminated to other people? Because I think, I've spoken to people and they are really concerned about the fact that you don't seem to take on the information that is given. There are other questions, but I'll leave until later, Chair.
Okay, Mark, Paul.
Yeah, I think I can take all three of them if you don't mind, Chair. The first one around ASB, I think we obviously know that we've got an increase in some of the hotspot areas where ASB occurs. We know that's going to happen. In fact, the past weekend, what we've just gone through, there was an issue potentially with some disorder, with some Misuse in the area of Gorsainen and in the area of Getty. So this is about intel based, and that we put the resources in place. But what I can just say to you, that I think the reassurance is that what we've done pre-pandemic, we can do post-pandemic with respect to how we manage ASB. And I did talk about it in the presentation around the staged approach and intervention, stage 1 through to stage 4. Stage 1 being a letter to the parents, but there's intervention that we do prior to that. And I know that there's a lot of good work going on, particularly with the schools and the youth groups and the NPTs, to really get into the areas where we think there might be a problem and do something as a precursor to deal with it. So the ASB structures are there in place already.
I think, can I just come in there, Chair, as well, as that what will also help with that engagement is when youth clubs start opening up again, because then we can then do that face-to-face engagement, which is going to be a lot easier with the young people that have had no sort of contact or peer group contact for a very long time.
Yeah, so I think the ASB side of it, I think you can have some reassurance that, albeit we know it's probably going to be a challenge in the summer months, as it inevitably always is. To move on to your second question about catalytic converters, we're very much aware that is an issue. And I don't know whether you're aware of this, but from the 19th to 25th of April just gone, we ran a specific operation around catalytic converters, which is called Operation Astria. And because we knew that from September to February, we had around 70 reported thefts of these particular items. And the reason why they are getting stolen is because they have valuable metals within them, platinum and rhodium. And when their value increases, people steal them and try and get them to scrap metal dealers. Now, the way to deal with this is, again, a similar way of dealing with a problem from the outset. With the operation that's just ran, we visited all the scrap dealerships within the area and looked at their processes. So they had absolute processes in place, so they could track what they were buying off certain people, so that they weren't succumbing to handling stolen goods or fencing material that was stolen. And that's about educating the scrap metal dealers as much as enforcement. So that's already run for the first week. We intend to run it again because like anything, crime can peak, and this particular area is of interest to you. So yeah, I very much appreciate that, but it's not something that's not on our radar. And I think just to deal with your third point, which is around intel, intelligence comes to us in many different ways. The intelligence you're probably referring to is around community intelligence, and that can be recorded in many different ways. But if it's intel with respect to a crime or an individual, then it's recorded formally. Sometimes we act upon it, sometimes we don't, because we look at that intel to gather for a specific problem, then we will act on it. It is unfortunate that that doesn't necessarily mean we get back to the person who's given us that intel, but we do track every bit of information that comes to us. We record it formally on our system so that we know what a particular problem looks like. So that is, I get the concern, but it's just the way that the intelligence works. But in particular, if it's around real issues around drug misuse, criminality, and county lines and things working in the community, that need a response from us that's measured and that takes some time with the intel together, and what's that response. So I think that may answer, or go in some way to answer your question.
Okay, Chris.
Can I come back on that one on the catalytic converters? I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, or what happens with some of the scrapyards that have been using them, because there must be somewhere they can sell them, otherwise they wouldn't be selling them. They wouldn't be stealing them.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree with you. And I think that's why I've said to you we need to go back, and I think we redo that operation because it's a market, isn't it? But the scrap dealerships in general are fully aware. With Trading Standards, we did this in partnership with Paul's teams, are fully aware of our expectations on them. And we're just going to have to make sure that we really do get acute with some of that intervention from our point of view.
Okay, Adam, do you have anything to add on catalytic converters?
Yeah, it's not that I'm an expert on catalytic converters, but there are safety measures as well, though, that owners of vehicles can do to protect their own vehicles and catalytic converters. One is have an alarm fitted to the car anyway, so any movement will set an alarm off. Secondly, when you take your car in for its MOT, your service, ask the garage to etch onto your catalytic converter your postcode or a code of some description, so it could be easily identified if you find it's gone missing, which will then help the police in progressing that. There are aftermarket brands also available to secure catalytic converters onto your car. So again, you can buy cages and you can buy nets that will go on and secure it, which means that people can't get access to it. Also about where you park your car, park it where it's light, make sure it's in an area. If you are a fleet owner, park them next to each other so that you can't easily get underneath them. So there's lots of other things before it gets stolen that car owners could actually do to safeguard their belongings. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Expert there. Sue Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I understand your presentation and the necessity to concentrate on the areas that you have most concerns with, but out in some of the wards we have all those issues, maybe on a smaller level, and I know my communication was with the Pcso, which I haven't had for a few months, but vandalism is huge within our area and it's very upsetting to people whose fences have been damaged, to weekends running. How do we allow that to happen, and can we organise something that people who vandalise equipment should pay for it? And I think then we maybe address some of the issues that we've had in my ward in Gowerton.
I think yes. Sorry. I think I think the approach. You're right with the approach, and I think there is a term that we use here that we have that you'll know, which is called restorative justice, and we do a lot of work when it's necessary, it's proportionate to do so to do some restorative justice on certain activities and certain crimes and incidents within the community. So that option is open to us. And I think, but that comes at an agreement between the victim and the perpetrator. So it is there as an option, and we probably need to put a little bit more effort around that, particularly. And I get your concern around some of the aspects of us dealing with volume stuff rather than stuff within the wards that you're concerned about. And I think if the neighbourhood policing teams and the partnerships are working correctly, and you've got a specific issue of vandalism in a particular area that's recurrent and it keeps happening, then we should problem solve that. One of them being restorative justice as an outcome, but the other stuff being around target hardening some of the areas where things have been vandalised and damaged. So you're quite right to point that out. It's incumbent on us to understand that problem, and this is a particular problem in your street, and we acted upon it. I think offline and out of this meeting, you need to contact myself, and we can see if we can deal with that proportionately.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just to add to that, Chair, as well, I know that the Youth Justice team are looking at that reparation type approach as well. So we're working through the ASB process. They are looking actually for young people to become involved in the community, to give something back, to understand that it's not acceptable, the actions that they've undertaken, and to put back to the community, realizing that what they've done has caused harm and distress to those that had a direct impact on. So there are a number of approaches that we are working with other services to address that issue, Councillor.
But we have to find out who they are, and that is an issue at the minute, because we have no idea who these youngsters are. It amazes me that people have a joy in vandalising things.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I come in and just respond to the councillor?
Yeah, Trudy, yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, councillor. And it's really disappointing when we hear these type of comments. You know, we talk about quality of life across all our areas, whether they're large or small. And we've got some really strong structures in place through our problem-solving groups. So we bring all agencies around the table with a local policing inspector, with a local PCSO for that area to discuss those issues. So what we'll do, we'll take this offline, we'll link in with the local policing inspector to ensure that we push this issue into the localised problem solving group, because we can talk about the local diversionary activity, but as you say, it's about identification and ensuring that these quality of life issues are dealt with as promptly as possible. So to provide some wider reassurance, we'll pick that up. And sorry, Chair, can I just go back to one point? I think Wendy's now left. She spoke earlier on about the experience of the public in her area and within her ward. And I think it's really fair to say that it's been a really difficult time for policing. It's been extraordinary in terms of the COVID-19 thrust. And for our officers that are out there, they've had 30 changes to legislation, which they've had to work through. They've had to adapt. And we haven't always got it right. And we have tried to take the public on the journey with us, because we do police by consent. So it's about really understanding those key areas where maybe we need to look back and reflect and take that learning on board for moving forward, particularly as we were really robust in terms of our approach, stepping through the 4 E's and only using enforcement as a last resort. So again, it's just for the chair and for the minutes, that's something we'll pick up with the councillor offline to understand what that looks like, to take the learning from that and drive it moving forward now as we go into and move into the recovery phase.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Trudy. That would be great, because I haven't got a PCSO at the minute.
Okay, thanks, councillor. We'll speak offline and we'll make sure you get contact.
Lovely.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, everyone. Right, Councillor Will Thomas. Is Will there?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I was just on mute then. Thanks very much, and thanks for the presentation. My ward is Langland, Castle, Newton area, and as I'm sure you're aware, I've dealt with the PC, Chris, many times over the last few months. We have a lot of issues, especially during COVID lockdowns, with people coming down to party from quite a long way away. It's always been an issue with people coming down, for late nights at Langland, drinking and things like that. But it obviously has got a lot worse over the last sort of year or so. A lot of residents obviously come to me and say, what's going to be done about this? What's going to be, because there's basically a lot of litter and a lot of noise, a lot of driving around in the cars, we think a lot of drink driving, which is one of my questions. I'm wondering if the sort of drink driving aspect, if we manage to stop them or test them rather on site, and if not, if that's something that we could potentially look at. But basically, it's not unique to Langland, obviously, the parties on the beachfront. And I'm just wondering, have you got the powers that you need to deal with this? And is there any bylaws that would be helpful, for example, that the council could help you with? Because from what I've seen, I've seen the PCs turning up, and there's hundreds of young people on the beach having music, drinking, messing around, and then the patrol comes down, which to be fair is very regular, very good, and comes down. What can they do? There's 20 fires on the beach, there's hundreds of people drinking and partying, and they kind of ignored the police. So I just wondered if there was a long-term strategy, which I think the drink driving patrols could be part of it, and if there's any powers that you think would be helpful for the council to give you.
Okay. Mark or Trudy or Paul, who wants to jump in on that?
I think I'll come in here. You're right, Councillor. That is, we've always reached the problem, haven't we? And again, in SA1, where we put patrols in place, but when we do get there, they can't do a great deal, and you're quite right in pointing that out because of what's congregated in front of us. We need to understand, don't we, what that problem is and how we can solve the problem. And I think for us, it is a combination of resources that we put into it to preempt drink driving and to do some of that stuff you're talking around with stop checks on vehicles, and to do that with such a regularity that people know that we're doing it and we're out and about doing it and proactively doing it. So there's that part of it. There is also the other elements of what you talked about in the presentation around whether this is such a common and such an impact on local residents, whether the local authority would consider the punitive approaches of PSPOs, which would be something that they would need to do measured in a measured way and looking at the evidence. And that's a punitive measure that would stop that in its tracks, I suppose. However, I think you need to consider that's all to do with displacement. I mentioned it in the presentation. The PSPOs will displace that, and it will technically go somewhere else potentially. So there are a number of options to look at. But I think, as I say, you're quite right that COVID has brought this to the fore, and I think it has been an issue for some years and in summer months, but it's really been exacerbated and made a lot worse by COVID. Atmosphere that we found ourselves in. So I think from our perspective, we probably need to look at how we pinpoint areas for criminality, which is drink driving, how we look at the antisocial behaviour in the area from respect to a PSPO potentially, but then look at the reasons why the young people are on the beach. But we've also got to be cognizant, have we, that there's a unless we introduce bylaws, unless we introduce something else, criminal offences and criminality are quite narrow in some of the things, unless it's antisocial behaviour. So this is a complicated problem, and I'm seen to be sort of talking around a number of options, but I think it's a complicated problem that together with the community safety partnerships and yourself, we probably need to have a real good think about the next steps. Chief Super, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. No, I think you've covered that all. I don't know whether it's worth just explaining what our powers are under the Section 35 and when we're able to utilise them and when we can't. I think that might just provide some clarity and confidence to the councillors.
Yeah, the Section 35 notices are issued, but we've got to have some evidence of antisocial behaviour order to issue that Section 35 notice, which is a notice of leave, a notice to leave the area. So, for instance, if you just take it in its real practical sense, we've got a group of individuals sat on the beach doing nothing but just sat there talking with each other. They're not underage, but they're drinking, but they're not underage. Then we are at the moment probably powerless if they're not being antisocial to do much with them. And that's probably the issue that we have to a certain extent. However, we do have powers with Section 35 notices if they are in place in that area, and we need evidence that there's been an issue in that area to put the Section 35s in place. If there's antisocial behaviour, then we can give them notice to leave. So this is, as I say, it's a complicated problem which demands a number of solutions. But yeah, I hope that goes some way in answering your question. But we were challenged by this in the summer months and through COVID. That is correct.
Could I come back, Chair, very quickly?
Yeah, of course, Will. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and you know, it adds to the problem when the officers turn up and it's all completely dark. You know, you're on a beach and everything's completely pitch black and you can't tell who's who, and you can't see more than, you know, X amount of meters in front of you. So I understand the issues are very hard with this, and it's I don't know what the answers are. All I know is that it is a real ongoing problem. You know, we've got people driving around a car park late at night. Obviously, once the patrols are gone, cars racing around, people walking up, and you know, music on the beach till late. I don't know what the answer is, but you know, the continued patrols, I'm sure, really help. And you know, the more patrols, the better, I suppose. If they could walk along the beach and even just you know, talk to the groups, at least they know the police are there. Then you know, I think there's a bit of that sort of community policing would, you know, regularly would be good with more patrols. I'm sure that's the best we can ask for on that, really.
Okay, I see Adam wants to come in on that. Before we bring you in, Adam, my understanding about bylaws is that they're not technically criminal laws. They should have to be enforced by the council, not by the police.
That's correct. Yeah. So bylaws, whichever law you look at, whether it's a criminal or civil or otherwise, it still takes enforcement in order to make it work. And it's just a caution against PSPOs, really. All you're really doing you know, public space protection order has its place within the tool set of all the things we've talked about. Section 35's enforcement, you know, jet teams, all these things are tools that we have. The problem is that Mark did say it earlier, a PSPO, when you put it in, just displaces. All it'll be is you'd have to do the whole of the coastline throughout the whole of the country, because that's all that'll happen. And we're moving the problem on. The other issue is, regardless of putting a PSPO in, we still need, so even if it's in place and we have the issues down at Langland or Caswell Bay, actually we still need a group of people to enforce it. So whether or not it's police, or whether it's the local authority through environmental health trading standards or our own enforcement officers, actually we still need this almost army of people that is going to turn out, and we don't have that number either. So the police don't, the local authority doesn't. So even putting a PSPO in place doesn't solve the problem. And so we just need a degree of caution of what we need to get to, and I don't have the answer yet, and it's something, you know, we're going to keep working through, is solve the problem at its root source. Is that, you know, people keep going to the beach, and they will, you know, always have. I remember as a boy having fires on a beach and having barbecues. The difference is it's the antisocial behaviour element, and what we've got to try and tackle is the society element of that, of why people are creating antisocial behaviour. Because I don't think anybody's against having, you know, a group of people on the beach having a drink, so long as it's not antisocial behaviour, so long as they clean up after them, so long as they utilise the resources that we've got available in a fit and proper way. So it's how do we get that? How do we make that societal change rather than just enforce them to move on to the next bay or the next area? So I don't have an answer. It's just, whenever I keep hearing PSPOs, it just fills me with dread, because I can just see we're going to have hundreds of these things throughout Swansea and not be able to enforce any of them because we don't have the resource.
Thank you, Chair. I think glass on the beach might be one thing which, you know, the council could get on board with, and I'm not sure that if there is one already, but glass on the beach, for example, and a big campaign to say no more glass on the beach, because it is an issue. Children are getting their feet cut on glass on the beach, you know, and I think that's something that we could do a bit of marketing towards.
Okay, I sense that Adam has brought us into deeper philosophical issues here, so I'm going to move on to the next question, which is Peter Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try again. Like others, I've got a couple of questions, if I may, that I'm listed to ask, and I'll try and group them together here. And the first relates to the partnership's strategic priority for hate crime. I noted in the presentation that in 2020, I think you were reporting something like 330 reported cases of hate crime, which is quite an alarming figure. I'm in that 330, Chair. I myself was a victim of what was classified by the police as a hate crime back in the summer, August of 2020. And first of all, I'd just like to say how well supported I was by the police. An officer came and visited me in my home. We talked through the case, the circumstances of it, the reasons behind it. And I then had regular monitoring phone calls from the police to ensure that I was, if you like, safe, that I was content that the causes behind the hate crime, or rather that the hate crime itself was not recurring. And I really would congratulate the police for the support in that regard. But my first question in relation to hate crime, though, is with reference to asylum seekers and refugees resident in Swansea. This is a group clearly who are potentially vulnerable to hate crime. And I'd welcome the comments, please, of the police in relation to what steps the partnership takes to improve community cohesion in relation to these particular people. And I speak as someone who's a member, an active, very active member of the Swansea Asylum Seekers support group. And I know quite a number very well, particularly those from El Salvador who have been the victims of horrendous treatment in their own country, and hence their presence here. And then my second, in a sense, unrelated question, but concerns the experience of the partnership in relation to the managing and policing of public rallies and demonstrations, which of course have now come particularly under the political spotlight. And we're not asking anyone to express a political view on this, but in relation to the UK government's proposed legislation in relation to future policing and ability to protest. And we'll all be aware, of course, that there have been demonstrations under the heading of Kill the Bill. There have also, of course, before that been demonstrations in relation to Black Lives Matter. And I guess at the moment there are demonstrations in relation to the Israel-Palestine conflict. So I'd welcome comments and answers, please, on both of those two areas of concern. Thank you.
Okay, who's going to take that, Mark?
Yeah, I think I can start off with the first point. I think we were very wary, weren't we, in the in recent times with respect to the impact of fear of criminality, if you like, against certain groups. And I think this was particularly brought to the fore within the media around Penally and the impact that that had on potentially some asylum seekers and communities. So I think we're very wary of that. And to be honest with you, we have dedicated hate crime officers who deal with cohesion, and they link very strongly into the local authority with the cohesion workers that they have working there. And as I said in the presentation, there is a format and a structure around our engagement, which sits with the weekly dial-ins around partnerships, but also around the community cohesion groups that we have running that are representative of a number of different groups within our communities who need our assistance. Now, I'm not 100% aware of any adverse incident involving asylum seekers locally. However, I'm sure that has been the case, and we've dealt with it appropriately. But I think, to be honest with you, my concern more than anything was people's fear of safety within Swansea, particularly with some of the media issues we had within Penally. So I think you could be reassured by the fact that we have the contact in place within the communities that need our help. But I think you're quite right to point out there's more work to be done, because I remember a few years ago now we were linked into quite a number of third sector organisations that are assisting asylum seekers, and we probably need to put more effort there as well around that area of business. But I do get it. We understand it, and I was very wary in recent months around the impact on individuals. How not necessarily about the incidents that may or may not have happened to them directly, but it's like the indirect sense of safety within our community. Just looking at what's happened in or some of the issues we had in Penally and some of the issues within the region. Yeah, and Paul just wants to come in.
Can I just say that there is a huge amount of due diligence that is undertaken before we identify appropriate accommodation and where we can offer housing for those that need it most. And unfortunately, we can't legislate for those that want to mete out hate crime because of the colour of someone's skin or what they may be wearing. So those victims may or may not be asylum seekers, but it's still something that should not happen. And victim support are part of our action group to deal with any of those hate crimes. So there is a lot of due diligence. We're very mindful and careful about how we can support those that may be most vulnerable or susceptible to hate crime. And we do take it incredibly seriously.
Could I just come back quickly on that first of all? And of course, one of the problems, and I know this particularly with many of the asylum seekers from El Salvador in Central America, they are afraid of the police. With justification in their own countries, they've actually been victimized. People have been murdered and other awful things done to them by the police in their own countries. And that's, of course, therefore a problem for them in understanding that we've got a very different police and a very different way of policing in this country compared to what happens in their own country. So I guess that might be part of an operational problem. And anything that we can do in the support group to help the police in relation to that, of course, we will do.
Councillor, I mean, I perfectly understand that those comments, and it's not only Salvador as well, that there are a number of communities that are fearful of authority, and I understand that. That's why we work incredibly closely with victim support. Victim support will be able to provide that first point of contact for those that feel that if they don't want to engage with the police, they can engage directly with victim support and go through that process there, where they will have the opportunity to have access to services to be able to then to deal with the concerns that they may have. So that's something, Councillor, that maybe we can work together on. But if we raise awareness of victim support and what they can provide to reassure those that have concerns, we're more than happy to support that.
Okay.
We welcome that.
Should we move on to Peter's second question then?
Rallies and demonstrations. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, I just want to ask, is your question around the policing of rallies and demonstrations in the context of COVID regulations, Councillor?
Well, I guess in the last 15 months or so, it has been. And perhaps it's very difficult for you, therefore, to answer the question. But I mean, I'm not aware of any problems, and I'm just wondering how, from a policing perspective, have you had any problems? Has it all been? I mean, these demonstrations, to the best of my knowledge, have always been intentionally peaceful. I just wonder whether you have any comments to make. I mean,
you know, I think, you know, we can't get political. Everybody has you know, the right to protest, and I think in the context of COVID, as long as it was organised correctly, it was structured well, social distancing was adhered to, and they communicated with us from the outset, from the organisation of it, then we were policing it in a proportionate and structured and peaceful way, and I think that's how we approached a lot of the demonstrations we had locally. We did not see, as I said in the presentation, we did not see luckily any disorder that was linked to them demonstrations. But you know, we've also be wary, I think, from a policing perspective, what causes us some real issues around demonstrations that just happen and just occur. And I think that's when we do become a little bit more enforcement led, if you like, on something like that. But yeah, it was a challenge for us, but locally we didn't have the same issues that you may have seen elsewhere. But it was something that we were mindful of, and you're quite right, it has taken quite a resource intensive thing for us to do, because every time there's a demonstration or a protest that we know is going to happen, we've got to put command structures and resources in place to deal with that, in addition to our daily business. So it is a little bit of a challenge, but we are geared up to do it, particularly with the systems from headquarters and the command structures. But yeah, it's about dealing with it proportionately and dealing with it robustly at the same time, understanding where COVID regulations sit.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I know of one demonstration that didn't take place. I think presumably they came to you too late to organise that, but the police are open during the COVID to actually accommodating and facilitating demonstrations, providing all the rules are followed. This is basically what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, Mike White.
So, yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, 2 points really. My concern is about partnership working and about the involvement with local members. Certainly, I've got issues where incidents happen, and first time myself or my other ward colleague finds out is either by it then turns up in the Evening Post or third hand. So clearly, there are issues around that. And also, what doesn't instill confidence really is, I got 3 divisions covering the ward I represent. And in one of the divisions, in the last 3 years, we've had 3 different inspectors. So that doesn't instill any confidence within the community. You know, so you think that you would have some continuity there where you could build up that partnership working and relationship where you can work, as they say, you know, I know if the Pcsos have issues with myself and it's council related, I work with them as teamwork to get the issue resolved. So I would hope that we could take that on board. And secondly, that, you know, why haven't we got warrant officers We've already got warrant officers in other areas of the city, but we don't seem to have a warrant officer patrolling the streets with our local Pcsos, because people say to us as councillors, we pay our preset to the police for services, yet we don't see a police officer. We see them in the city centre or outside other areas, but within other parts of the city, they just are just not visible. And also in relation to Pcsos, not putting any sort of criticism towards them, but they do a first-class job. The ones that we got within the wards, the section of the wards that they cover, but they simply haven't got the powers which they should have. I know that there are measures to give them the powers, but they should have the authority to use them. So I would hope that that the police would clearly look at those points which I've just raised. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Mark? Or...
Yeah, okay, that is understood. I'll just take the last point first. I think it's probably worth, Councillor, I think that the local policing inspector, probably outside the meeting, sitting down with you and going through what the neighbourhood policing team looks like in your area. And I think it's probably worth fully understanding what the role of a Pcso is. And a Pcso, the primary role of a Pcso is not enforcement. The primary role of a Pcso is about engagement and community and dealing with the fear of crime rather than the actual crime itself. So the whole concept of that role is about contact with the public and being seen. And the reason for that is because we recognised, didn't we, early on when we brought the Pcsos in, that we needed to extend our police family and extend it to even police volunteers, because we just knew that warranted officers, their daily business was sitting within criminality. But in your team that covers your areas, you should have a neighbourhood beat manager who is a warranted officer. You should have neighbourhood police PCs who are warranted, who assist the Pcsos in doing what they do, primarily looking at the priorities within that area. So I think they are a valued member of the team because they do a specific role. I get the perception, I really do, around powers, but their powers are limited. You are right, but they do have a different role that they have to commit to every day. And I think the other side of that, I do take your point around some of the issues with respect to local policing inspectors and the movement of inspectors. I do understand that, and I also do understand it is part and parcel sometimes of what we do, but we try not to do it, and we try not to move key members of staff around every year, because we do know that it's continuity that you need, and it's continuity that the public needs. And to that extent, we definitely try our best never to move Pcsos, because we know that we want them to embed in the community and get the local contacts going. And so we don't give them a disservice by moving them. But I take your point, but our primary focus is to maintain continuity within the police officers and the Pcsos that you meet day to day. And I think what may be a problem here for maybe you specifically, I don't know, but if you've got three sectors sitting within your area of responsibility, it may sit between three separate LPIs. I don't know. But I'd like to take that out of the meeting to make sure you're getting the service and the contact from the LPI who's in post presently, to ensure that we're doing everything we must do for your ward and your area. Chief Super, do you want to comment on that at all?
No, it was really to echo what Mark said. It's really difficult for us in policing. Our continuity is our neighbourhood policing teams, our Pcsos, and we talk about the movement of police officers. And because we have quite regular promotion opportunities within policing, that's when you'll see the movement. And I know, Councillor, it doesn't go down well, but it does happen annually, and we're going through another promotion process in the next 2 weeks. Now, how that looks on your sector, on your ward, I don't know. But what I will say, and just to echo what Mark has said, is we do try to keep our LPIs in role for at least 2 years, just to build that consistency and to build those relationships. And we can talk about relationships. They're far more powerful than structures. That's what drives the activity. That's what drives the activity out into the community. So as Marcus said, if we can take this offline, have a conversation with you. As I said, the movement is fluid, and I'm really understanding of you know, some of the issues that you've raised for you and your ward, and we'll take that on board as we go through the next round of promotion processes.
I would certainly welcome that, because it is frustrating when you build that rapport and then next thing the person has moved on and you've got to start all over again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we'll discuss that outside, and I'll look at it to see how that looks for you and the LPIs moving forward, because I can't sit here and promise we're going to be able to keep the same LPI in post for the next 2 years when I know we've got interviews at the end of this month. So we'll take it offline and have those conversations.
Okay, thank you.
I think Landor's got City Centre, Town Hill and Morriston.
That's it, Chair, that's right. Yeah,
there's three policing sectors that cover that one ward, so that's quite difficult to manage, I can imagine. I think the point on powers for PCSOs, there are other areas who give their PCOs more powers than we have in South Wales, because I know when PCSOs came in that Barbara Wilding, who was then the Chief Constable, wasn't that much in favour of them and didn't give them the full extent of the powers available. So I think there are more powers that PCSOs can have if the policy of the police force decides to take that. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that is correct, Chair.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Okay. Joe Hale. Is Joe here? I think he is. You're muted at the moment, Joe, if you're going to contribute. No. Should we come back to Joe then? And Chris, you've got Chris.
Well, I end up for half an hour.
Yeah, I'm working through the list of the questions from the pre-meeting, Terry. Do you want to come in now, Terry, while Joe sorts himself out then? You're muted at the moment, Terry.
A lot's been said about the high street and domestic abuse and sexual violence and towards sexual workers. Has there been any convictions or anything been taken to court of those who live off immoral earnings and exploit these people? That's one question. The second would be the same then for off-road bikers. Any convictions or anything been to court? That's all it is.
Okay. Mark, are you aware of any statistics on that, or Paul?
Because I haven't had prior knowledge of the question, I haven't got any data that I can give at this time, particularly around the point of people living off immoral earnings. I will have to bring that back. I just know that we are. Say again, sorry.
I understand that.
Yeah, but you know, again, I think in the presentation that I gave, be assured that we are. As I said, it's about safeguarding, but it is about disruption and enforcement of the people who are exploiting the women who are on the street in that particular activity. So we are very much geared into taking absolute positive, robust action in that particular area. But if you want, I can take that offline. I can give you the answer when I'm aware. With respect to off-road bikes, I know that there's been quite a lot of work going on around seizure of vehicles and on specific operations with our traffic colleagues. So there's been some real positive action there around what has happened with them. But that's another issue that is close to our hearts, and we're trying our best to ensure that a positive action is taken there. But I do know activities happening. I do know we've had some results from that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add one point as well in terms of the question that was raised? In terms of immoral earnings, it's a real difficult offence to prosecute. So what we do is we look at the other offending, because there's normally a hand-in-hand other offending that happens, whether it's harassment, domestic abuse, drug taking, assaults, because there's a lot of criminal exploitation associated with our most vulnerable on High Street. So we will look at other criminal offences and prosecute under that legislation to ensure as well that we're safeguarding the victim. And in terms, and the second point, in terms of off-road biking, I know Mark spoke about it in the main presentation and what the plans are moving forward. We have had some specific activity, particularly up in Town Hill, where we've identified individuals responsible, and they're actually going through the process at the moment. So we'll keep you updated on those stats, but I just wanted to add that little bit of extra context around it.
Okay, thank you. Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in the presentation, it was mentioned in connection with the vet and the fact that there's various drug problems there, etc., that additional seating is going to be provided. Now, I'd like to know the police view on seating. We can all understand it's lovely to have tables and benches, say, where there's a playground, so parents can bring their children and sit and perhaps have a picnic and so on and so forth. However, I'm sure there are other members who have the problems that I have, and especially in the summer months when the playground in my ward becomes a bit of a magnet for the nighttime revellers who turn up there and gather in the early hours. Now, were we to have tables and benches, additional seating, shall we say, this would surely add to the attractiveness of the location for those who wish to pursue various antisocial activities, especially drinking. So I just wondered if the police had a view and if there was any advice they could give on how best to, you want to do the best for your ward, you want to improve the facilities for the majority, but unfortunately it is always the minority then that take advantage and abuse the provision that you put in place.
Okay. Any comments?
Yeah, it's a really good point, to be honest. But I think my initial view is we've got a duty to provide quality of life and issues to the people who abide by the laws of which we all abide. So I think in the first instance, I get the point about it may attract antisocial behaviour, but for quality of life issues and to make spaces feel safer and feel more, how can we put it, more confident for people to go there, we've got to put structures in place. We've got to put benching. We've got to put places where people can go and relax. And I do think, and again, it's the double-edged sword, isn't it? We don't want to see a society, do we, where we take every element of that away just in case the minority is going to spoil it for the majority. We've got to work with the minority to ensure that they don't do it. And part of the ASB referrals, part of all the stuff I've talked about in the presentation is geared to that. So I think that's my humble view. I'm the ASB lead for the force as well, so it's a similar thing. We've got to work with the communities, all aspects of that community, to make sure that the majority get what they need and the quality of life is increased, and the minority, which is a very thin minority, don't commit crime or antisocial behaviour, and we work with them as well to ensure that that happens. But I do take your point. It's a good question, in fairness.
Okay. Councillor Joe Hale's having technical difficulties. His mic's not working, so I'm going to ask his question for him, which is, what is the level of funding for the partnership and how has that changed over recent years? And in terms of police resources, do we have the right balance between police officers and Pcsos and the right level of coverage across the area to deal with the issues and improve public confidence?
Chair, if I take the funding issue, what some people don't realise is that the Safer Swansea Partnership is an alliance. So it is statutory partners primarily, but also non-statutory. So we receive no direct funding for the Safer Swansea Partnership. However, what we do receive from the Police and Crime Commissioner is some grants which enables the local authority to employ a community safety officer and an ASB officer, and also support officer for ASB, that work very closely with the community safety team within South Wales Police here in Swansea. They have access to niche and are important with regard to the ASB process and working with the youth justice and local policing in ensuring that we address those ASB issues. So we don't get any funding, and that's one of the issues that I have raised with Adam, and it's something we're going to discuss, is that with pressures now on budgets going forward, my team, which is broader than community safety, rely heavily on grant funding to exist. So We can go to the Crime Commissioner if we identify an area of risk where we believe that there needs to be a resource and something spent to address that issue. There is no guarantee that we're successful. We have put in 2 bids for the Safer Streets Fund, and we will hopefully hear whether or not we're successful sort of middle to end of this month. So we don't ignore opportunities to access funding. We will look where possible to submit bids on a partnership basis, but we receive no direct funding for a Safer Swansea partnership.
Okay, and I guess, Mark, on the second question, you'd like more police officers.
If I say yes, do I get them? Is that how this works? No, I think again, I think the force. If I just step back a minute, the force have done some, as in South Wales Police, have done some work quite recently around what our demand is locally here and in the other areas, and what the demand looks like from a vulnerability perspective, from a geography perspective, from a crime perspective, and have come up with an assessment of what resources should look like. I think we probably are. With the mix between PCSOs and police officers, that's probably about right from our perspective, we would see. But if you ask any divisional commander if they need more police officers, they're probably going to say I could do with a few more. I think the Chief Super is nodding ahead. But I think the answer to your question is that we have put, and we are putting, I think, for the future, some science behind that demographic of police officers and how many we have got to deploy. But every day we talk within the SSD about where the resources go that we do have available, and we work really hard to put them in the places of most need for the communities, and that is a physical effort every day to do that. And if you think about where we've been in the pandemic, that has been even more of a challenge with some of the pop-up demand, if you like, that we've had to seek with. So yeah, I think the answer to your question is we have got what we've got, and we work with them efficiently to put them in the right places. But if you are providing more police officers, we will happily take 1 or 2. Chief Super, would you want to add to that or not?
No, I totally agree. Crime is complex. We've seen that. We've seen it through the pandemic. We've got more online crime. We've got higher levels of vulnerability around domestic abuse, mental health, suicide, the drugs and the work that we're doing in respect of that. And we could always, take more police officers and put them out in the community, enhancing, the service that they're giving to you and the communities. But there's only so many. We're in a better position than we were last year. We have had an increase in officers. We're also looking at taking an increase in PCSOs, and that's on the horizon. So it's about being efficient and effective in terms of where we place them, looking at those high areas of vulnerability, those high areas of crime and antisocial behaviour, and being really effective. But of course, it's our joined up partnership work that's really driving the activity. And the work that's ongoing with the Safer Swansea partnership that's been described today has been phenomenal. So that's what helps us to drive that activity within your wards.
Okay, Adam, we're running up against time, so unless it's really urgent, I just want to take the last few questions because a lot of members have to go at 6 o'clock. So
sure.
If that's
I just want to make one comment in that although we're focusing there on the police in terms of do they need extra resources, Trudy is here really because she's co-chair. We are, as Paul said, a cooperation of multiple partners. So, if we had more health workers, we had more mental health professionals that were available, that would free up more resource from local authorities and police. If we had more DV support workers, domestic violence support workers, again, that could free up more work. If we had cohesion officers within the local authority, a greater number, again, that would free it up. I think we could look at the police as one entity, but as a partnership, I could look at every partner that we've got is probably under-resourced.
Okay, right. Jeff Jones.
Thanks, Chair. My original question has really been answered, but if I can always bring in another particular part.
Can you do it quickly,
I've got to say,
please?
first of all, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate the Chief Superintendent saying, we haven't always got it right. Well, I don't think any of us have always got it right anyway. But I think, Adam mentioned partners and the police, but I think, without them, there'd be chaos. But my question really relates to, the passing of information. I know Adam has touched on it and actually mentioned, being swamped and so on. But we've had initiatives in the past with regards to Rat on a Rat and something on the BBC and so on that people, should informed. Now, are we going to, I know you've mentioned swamped and so on, but the residents, the eyes and ears really of the community. And a lot of residents really perhaps even come to councillors because they haven't got the confidence or don't really want to report something themselves, especially on the drugs front and so on. Are we going to nurture people to actually report, or what? I know you said you're actually going to look at it, Adam, but I'll be interested to see what you actually come up with.
Okay, who's going to answer that quickly, please?
If I'll quickly answer that one, absolutely, Jeff. Look, although we are, we have a lot of information coming our way. We want more information, but we want it to be accurate. We want to have mechanisms that can be automated and utilize modern technology in order to be able to get that information and have it sort of corroborated where we can, so that it's factual, accurate, and it's the type of information that becomes intelligent that ultimately will become wisdom. And it's that network of information that we need. It's not just the raw data, it's actual informed situations, timely, that we can then feed through. And whether they give that to councillors, the police, local authority officers, I don't mind where the information comes in. The networks that we have through support workers and the whole of the partnership is that wherever it gets fed in, we'll then feed it through so that it gets to the right place. And if then, say, the police, for example, need to follow up on that, then they will. We can give that information over and then they'll progress it through their normal systems of work. But we can always improve, and that's what we want to do as a partnership, look for other ways we can obtain that information.
Okay. Sorry, Peter. So to clarify, I've been informed, shall we say, by certain police and so on, that they can't accept that information because people have reported it to me and I can't pass it on. So, how are we going to look at those particular barriers?
I'm no police expert, but the police, in my experience, will take any information that we give them. What they would then do is follow that up with the individual who has passed that information to you to make sure it's accurate firsthand and then pursue it that way. But in terms of that first piece of information coming through, that can be fed through anywhere to anyone, and the police will then take it on after that point if it's a criminal matter. If not, it may be one of us to do with licensing or trading standards or environmental health. So it depends on the information and where that needs to go to, but we'll make sure it's channeled to the right area.
Okay. Alexander Roberts, did you have a question as well? Alexander?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry to delay the meeting by yet another question, but it's incredibly interesting to have this update, to be honest. I represent primary schools in Swansea, the governing bodies of primary schools, and I'm interested in your comments, and I think you've answered part of the question, to be honest, around the online provision that you've managed to do in terms of outreach and engagement. But really, as we might optimistically be coming out of a lockdown or the pandemic, what lessons can we learn around engaging with young people in schools where you'd normally roll up as part of pastoral days and other such events? If this happens again, and it's entirely likely that we're going to do it, how do we organise ourselves so that we can make sure that engagement happens so that people aren't at risk within their own homes of becoming, well, you know what I mean. So I'm just interested in your thoughts. Is it just that we'll just go to online and that'll be it and we'll make it work? Or is there something else, some other greater learning that we have as a result of what you've been through, please?
Adam?
Yeah, I think it's greater than just online. Online has a purpose. What we've got to look is the multi-channels, that omni-channel approach. There's still something about person to person, giving that trust, giving that ability and understanding that you can't get from an online. But the online has a place. So when we think of domestic violence and what we've done with the artificial intelligence and that people can message through, again, it's great that they can utilize that in a safe zone to make us aware, and we can then respond accordingly through the relevant agencies. So it's going to have to be a blended approach. And one of the things that we've learned is that actually the most vulnerable need that personal contact, and we need to find out how we do that. But how do we do that and also keep our workforce safe if it is COVID or whatever it may be in the future? So our learning is it's a blended approach that we need to do. One route will not solve all problems.
Okay, well, I need to call this session to an end now. I'm sorry, but the members have any other questions. I'm sure we can take them up outside the meeting, but can I thank all the participants, particularly the police and the partnership officials, to come along and answer the question. I think it's been a tremendously interesting session, so thank you very much for coming along. Thank you. Okay. Right.
Thank you, Chair.
We're going to move on to the next item, which is the Scrutiny Performance Panel Progress Report, and thank you, Peter, for hanging on to give your report.
I'm getting very nervous, Chair. Thank you for managing to squeeze me in somehow. Yes, thank you. This is the first opportunity that the new Natural Environment Scrutiny Performance Panel has had to report on its work. We were, of course, created by this committee back in July 2019, and since then we've managed to fit in only five meetings, although we are now scheduled to meet on a 2-monthly basis. And of course we had something of a hiatus during 2020 because of COVID, and I won't bore you with the details over that. But can I just say, and very, very briefly, because I do really have to rush off, unfortunately, Chair, I'm very proud of this panel. It was something that I proposed, it was agreed, has been set up. It was, in a sense, a son of the Natural Environment Scrutiny Inquiry, which I led during 2018 and into 2019. It's doing wonderful work, as I hope you can see from the list of main topics in the 5 meetings that we've so far been able to have. We've got further meetings planned, as you will see from the forthcoming topics list, and you can see the sheer importance, things like air quality, local flood risk managing, ash dieback, water pollution, green space management, and so forth. So it shows the sort of scale and importance of the work that the performance panel is engaging with. I won't say any more. Oh, there's just one point I would like to make, and that is in terms of under number 4, achievements impact, the first bullet point. Both the Section 6 Duty Biodiversity Officer and a new planning ecologist, those posts have now been filled. And that really is an achievement, I think, from the Natural Environment Scrutiny Inquiry. I'm not sure that they would have happened otherwise, notwithstanding the Welsh Government's Environment Act. But I'll pause then. Welcome to take any questions or comments, Chair. You're muted, Peter.
I know. Sorry, my phone rang, so I had to mute myself. Has anybody got any questions or comments at all on the report?
No, I am.
No. Can I thank you then, Peter? It's very helpful and very informative, and more power to your elbow. I think as we go along, hopefully you'll be able to continue to focus the council's response to the environmental crisis we're all facing. So thanks very much for that,
okay,
Peter.
thank you. Sorry, I must leave off. Rush off. Thank you.
I'm just going to wrap up now anyway. So okay, thank you for that. So the next item is membership of scrutiny panels and working groups. There's no changes to consider or agree. Item 9 is the scrutiny work programme. You'll note that the next meeting is we're going to scrutinise the Public Service Board again. So we're going to hear some key partners like Mid-Westphal and Rescue Services and Natural Resources Wales. Anybody got any comments on that at all, or happy with that? No?
I'd be delighted for Natural Resources Wales to come in front of us to find out what they're doing.
I know you're looking forward to that one, Chris, yes. And item 10, scrutiny letters for information. And item 11, the date and time of upcoming scrutiny panel meetings. So, and the next meeting is Tuesday, the 15th of June at 4 p.m. So can I thank you all for attending, although those of you who are left. And I think it's been quite an interesting meeting, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Bridge and Craig and all the Kate. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Thank you.